Welcome to the world of Mark's Money Mind, coming to you this week from Longmont, Colorado. I'm your host, Mark Troutman. This educational personal finance show combines money lessons, timely topics, personal stories, and community wisdom to help listeners and viewers master their finances to enjoy a stress-free life of financial freedom. This episode was recorded at the world headquarters of the Mile High Fi podcast, aka Doug Cunnington's basement studio, right down the road here in Longmont. We had a fun discussion about loosening the purse strings in 2024, exercising our spending muscles, something that is frequently a challenge for folks in the financial independence community. Enjoy the conversation.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to the Mile High Fi podcast. I'm Doug Cunnington. I have my good buddy Mark sitting in with me today. How's it going?
I'm doing awesome, Doug. How are you?
I'm having a good day. I was pumped to have you come over. You recently moved to Longmont, and I think you've been here for a little while, but I've been slightly busy slash detached from like social activities a little bit. And I haven't seen you, but how's the move going
Well,
and everything?
the move is going great. I actually bought the house in November, but I was away, so I bought it as an absentee owner, I guess you would say. Mindy and my daughter actually closed on it for me, which was great. But I've been here really full time since in January, but I've been traveling, as we'll probably talk a lot about.
Yeah.
And also, I do still have a foothold in Crested Butte. I have a little apartment there, so I've been going back and enjoying the skiing and teaching a little bit of the financial literacy class over there. So I haven't been around as much, but I will be around more often going forward.
Cool. All right. It's good to have you in town. Today, we're going to talk about non-frugal habits slash spending that we did in the last year or two. And basically, Carl and I, before we left the show, we had, I think, a 3-part series about how to break away from some of our frugal habits, which many of us in the community have. We actually enjoy saving money and or getting a deal, which I still have. But as I think like maybe Die with Zero, 4,000 weeks, plus the conversations that we're having in the community, essentially like certain people are trying to spend a little bit more money in testing things to see, is this valuable to me or is this a waste? And I think it's a good spot to be in. And I think you don't want to try to do this too early. If I did this in my 20s, then maybe I wouldn't have what I have now. So there's sort of a balancing act, but we're just going to have some fun and talk about things we spent money on. And you said you had a huge list.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was going through the list last night. I was like, let me think about all the things I spent on. So I actually have a fun bucket. And I think we've talked about that before. Maybe you've heard about it. And the idea of that was it came about as a friend of mine, Kevin Sebesta, suggested. We were both retired. We had both been doing exactly what you said. You follow the 4% rule. Well, maybe it should be 3%. Maybe it should be 2%. And when we started our retirements, we were spending way under what we could. And you're always worried about that sequence of return, right? Am I going to have a bad sequence? But what happened was we were both pretty much like 5 years into our retirement. Not only did we not have a bad sequence, but we had a good sequence. And then you start saying, okay, well, I'm spending as if I'm going to have the worst sequence that has ever been known to man. And yet that didn't happen. And in fact, the opposite happened. So we both talked about, well, what do we do now? We kind of oversaved initially anyway. And it was like, well, how do we learn to spend more comfortably? Like you said, always being frugal. And the idea was take some of that off the top and push it over to the side into this separate fund bucket and then assume as if it's already spent, but it gives you that pot to spend from without any guilt. And it's been a massive change in the way that I do things. I'm not disrupting my overall financial plan. There's no risk to running out of money. It's literally like taking some of the money off the table that we underspent or I underspent at the beginning and said, okay, well, you could have spent all the way up to 4% or even higher. So go ahead and take that off the top, put it over to the side, allow yourself to spend it, because if you leave it in the full bucket, you're not going to spend it. You're
Okay.
just gonna look at it as the entirety, and you're gonna be afraid to spend anything, just like you always have been.
Gotcha. The whole thing is like a psychological shell game situation, right? Because like you're moving the money. So you're like, this is already spent. Like my projection, my portfolio still supports me, yet there's this pile of money over here. So when you told me about it, when I heard the whole concept, I was like, this is great. I told Elizabeth about it. It was before she retired. And I was like, I think this could free us up a little bit because I don't have the same I don't need to play the same psychological games as she does, and everyone's different, right? I just view things a little bit differently. I'm like, it's still in the same bucket, but there's one thing you mentioned in the past, and that's like the sequence of returns. So if you pull it off, then you don't feel the pain of maybe the market's down and you're like, "Oh, well, I have leeway to spend whatever, an extra 20K per year." But if the market's down, you're gonna think a little too hard about it, right? And you're like, "I don't wanna sell when the market's down," so you don't spend it.
Well, and that's why I really fret when I hear people say, "Oh, well, if the market's down, you just dial things back." I'm gonna be 60 years old this year, right? So you think about how much time do you have left? Now, hopefully, I live a long time, but you don't wanna have to feel like I've gotta dial it back for the next 3 years or 4 years when you don't know how many years you have to really enjoy things to the fullest, be the most active, the ability to travel overseas to far-flung places. And I didn't wanna be in that situation where, "Well, I'll just dial it back for a year or 2." I wanna be able to just go and not worry about the market, so that fund bucket is in a money market. It is in cash, there's no risk, there's no concern about, "Can I afford this trip next year because the market's down?"
Love it. And yeah, great concept. I think it's caught on with a lot of people. Can you tell us the exact amount if you want, but can you give us a percentage or some idea before we get into some of the things we spent money on? Just like what level should people set aside or think about maybe if they want to test this concept or something?
Yeah, I kinda like percentages because my numbers are different than other people's numbers and so forth. I'm happy to give the actual numbers, but I think when people think about it, percentages helps. So I kind of viewed it as my normal spending rate was X dollars, and it's equivalent to like an extra 20% above that. So let's say hypothetically you were spending, I'll just use a round number to make the math easy, $100,000 a year, which is a lot, right? You might do 20 or 25,000 on top of that per year in this fund number, I guess you would say, or fund bucket. I just wanted to be able to do the math easily on
Yeah.
a lie, so I used 100, but it could
Okay.
be a percentage, 20, 25%, something like that, and that's what I did. I did a percentage of my normal spend, so it's impactful. Now, I'm retired. This is my 10th year of retirement, actually. I've not made any money purposely in the last 10 years. So I've had a good sequence. So there's a lot of factors that go into that for me personally.
Got it. And you mentioned you and Kevin, which I need to get Kevin on the show before too long, or we'll just play guitars down here or something. But
Yeah, he'll bring you go to his house and you can play in that huge Marshall stack he's got.
I have a mini one right here that takes a 9-volt battery. It's a little I could put it on my belt and
You
walk
know, he's
around.
going on the Monsters of Rock cruise next week, I think,
That's cool.
as of this recording, anyways.
That's cool. All right. Oh, yeah, so you and Kevin, for about 5 years, you were retired, and you were like, "Hey, this has been great, but maybe we need to figure out how to, like, really do this." So, any other details around it, to add context, or should we just get into the stuff?
No, I don't think so, but I think it is helpful to have other people kind of push you, and as I was going through my spending last year, you'll see I shared these experiences with other people who have their own fun bucket. Each of us push each other to it's like, "Really? Should I really do that?" And you're like, "Well, I'm doing it, so you should do it," you know? So and we're in the same kind of asset level and timeline, so it's easy to have that accountability spending accountability partner, I guess you would
Yeah.
say.
It's so funny. It's the opposite of what I mean, it makes sense. It's the opposite of, like, people are in a group and they're like, "All right, we're saving, we're gonna get out of debt," or whatever, and now you're in a different
Well, we're on the
stage.
back end of this
Yeah.
whole timeline. So
Yeah.
we're on the downslope, the spending side,
Yeah.
whereas most people in this community are on the accumulation side. And yeah, absolutely. That is what I did, and that's what he did, and that's what others in this kind of cohort did. We all were super savers for many,
Mhm.
many years. But then eventually it's like, well, what are you going to do with all this at some point,
Yeah.
right? If you've been really successful at doing it, there should be a kind of, well, now what?
Yeah.
And we're in the now what period.
I think some of yours will be higher level than what I'm doing, so I'll start, all right? So I'll start. I don't wanna go after you. So one of mine, just this is a simple thing, and it is ordering, like, the more expensive item, and there's a specific example. So we went out to some local, like, nice restaurants called Sugar Beet. It's in town here. Have you been there yet?
No, no.
So pretty nice. It's by the railroad tracks, and you're like, "This is a pretty nice place for the location that it's at." Kind of an odd location overall. And I was gonna order a steak. I usually don't order steak out because I think I could do a better job most of the time, but I was like, "This is supposed to be one of the finest restaurants here in Longmont, so I'll check it out." And it had 2 options. I think one was, a skirt steak or some other sort of lesser, more economical option, and then they had the filet. And I was like, "I kinda want the filet," but I didn't even this was all in my head. I was like, "Kinda want the filet," but it's like, whatever, it's $55 instead of 35 or something. I forget the price, but it was a little bit more, but nothing crazy. And Elizabeth was like, "Do you really want that one, or do you wanna get the filet?" And I was like, "I kinda want the filet." She was like, "Just order it. It's only a little bit more, like, it's inconsequential for what we're looking at right now, and we don't eat out that often, so just go ahead and get it." So I did order it, and I was like, "Yeah, you're right." And I was like, "It's fine." Yeah, like, we don't even notice it. Again, this is a small dollar amount, but it's just
No, I'm the same way because I feel the same way, like, I could make this at home probably as well or close to as well for a fraction of the cost. But I agree with you. If I am gonna order a steak, I'm gonna order the filet mignon because it's just usually better. They don't mess it up. It's not usually dry, like, some of the others are overcooked, and I'm just like, "If you're gonna order it, just go for it and don't worry about it."
yeah, totally. So, it ended up being a good thing overall, and then closely related, I'll double up. We typically eat in, like, most of the time. I think we would only eat out, like, maybe once every 2 to 3 weeks or something like that, and we were just like, "We should eat out more." Like, we like some of the restaurants, there's some cool happy hours and breweries and blah, blah, blah. So we're like, one of our things that we're trying to do is just to eat out more, which is, like, directly against what the most of the advice on personal finance is like, "You can save a lot of money. What are you spending on food? Don't eat out so much." And we're like, "We should eat out more and support these local businesses around here." It's been fun. We invite a couple friends out and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit social, and it does help the local community because it's tough to run a restaurant and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it goes to spend where your values are, right? So it's important to you, and especially the social aspect. You get the double benefit there. You get the good food and the social aspect. I still don't eat out very much, but as you'll see, I definitely do spend money on other things that are socially related, I guess you would say.
So let's get to your first one.
I've gone on the FinTalks cruise the last 2 years. So it was in January of 24 and just finished again in January of 25. You can choose an interior room, you can choose a balcony room, or you can go big, right? So on the first cruise, this is in 24, I booked my own room. Kevin said later, "Hey, I want to go on this cruise." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I have a balcony room." And he's like, "Well, can we share it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, we could." And he said, "Or we could just get a suite because basically it's the same price that you were going to pay by yourself times two, but we share the suite." And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it." So we got a suite on
Nice.
that. And then we did it again this year. And this year's ship was much bigger and a much bigger suite and with a lot of perks. So I guess we're stuck with having to have a suite every year now from now on. I mean, it was a little bit more costly, but it was definitely worth it.
So I've only been on one river cruise and no big ocean cruise, what's the suite like? What kind of level of amenities are we talking?
So on the last one, so this is 2025, we were on the Oasis of the Seas. It's Royal Caribbean, and their suites, you get a lot of extra perks. So there's a separate suite lounge that's only available to people who have suites. They also serve drinks in there, which is nice for free, which normally you have to pay for. They also have separate areas by the pool. They have a separate dining room. And then there's some other amenities. If you want to go to a show, they just get you in. There's no problem. And
Got
there's
it.
special seating. And so there's a number of perks. It was also like you go in through a separate entrance when you board. They escort you off the ship. So
Okay.
there was a whole bunch of extra perks, but the room itself was about twice the size of a regular balcony room. So it's kind of like we just had two balcony rooms that didn't have a wall in between it, in essence, right?
Got it.
So we, obviously twin beds, but the bathroom is much bigger. And I'm happy to share a bathroom as long as it's a decent size. So instead of having two tiny bathrooms, we had one large bathroom.
Gotcha.
It was a little bit more than maybe what two balconies would be individually, but not much more.
And you get all those great perks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounds like it takes a little of the stress off, like you said, a separate entrance. And if you want to do something, like you don't have to worry too much about getting the last ticket or seat or
Yeah,
whatever.
because I guess Kevin and Becky and Steven also, Becky from one of the original co-hosts of the Catching Up to Fi podcast, and her husband were on there with us, and they were like, well, you guys are getting a suite, we're getting a suite.
Nice.
But yeah, some of those perks were great, and they didn't have tickets. They didn't realize you had to actually reserve, even though you don't have to pay for the shows. You do have to make reservations. Like, we didn't know that. So we just went to the concierge at the suite desk and said, oh, we want to go to their shows. And they're like, absolutely. What time? And they were just like, done. And
Got it.
even like a restaurant, which you needed reservations for, but you didn't have to pay for. We're like, can we eat at this restaurant? And they're like, well, it's reservations only, but yeah, sure. What time do you want to go? And we're like, well, whatever they have available. She's like, what time do you want to eat? I was like, I don't know, 6:30. She's like, done.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. And well, why don't you keep going? Because I gave two. So cruise, you upgraded, you got like the more premium option.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of cruises this year. We meaning, so I have this group called the Slackers. Kevin's in it. Stephen and Becky are in it. A number of other people are in it. It's from our kind of rock retirement club group, all in the same stage. So we've been doing a number of cruises this year, which is kind of interesting because I never thought of myself as a cruiser. But we go on this line called Silver Sea, which is like a really high-end cruise line. It's actually owned by Royal Caribbean. So a couple of hacks. Here comes the frugal hack, right? If you have certain status on Royal Caribbean, it translates over into a very high status on Silversea. And so if you have 30 days on Royal Caribbean, you can get what's equivalent to having 100 days on Silversea. And that gives you the most important perk, which sounds weird, is free laundry.
Okay.
But laundry is super, super expensive on a cruise ship, and you get free laundry no matter how many times you want to have your laundry done. And you also get 5% off all future cruises, and their cruises are pretty expensive, so the 5% off really is material. So we did a cruise run on Royal Caribbean because we already had the FinTalks days, and we're like, we need to get 30 days. So in the spring of last year, I did a Caribbean trip. If you have your own room, you get double points. So I had my own room for a Caribbean trip, and then I did a 4-day kind of finish off to get the 30 days cruise. And I also had my own room, so I got double points. So I got the 30 points I needed. It translated over to Silversea, and then we did a whole bunch of Silversea cruises last year.
Gotcha.
So went to the Mediterranean with my daughter and my mother, and Becky and Stephen went on that one as well. And then Becky and Stephen have a bucket list of places they want to go. And they're a little bit older than I am, so they want to kind of go years, use
Yeah.
those years, right? So they said, I want to go to Australia and New Zealand, and there's this cruise. And I was like, well, I'm really interested in New Zealand. When is it? And she's like, it's in December. And I was like, well, I'm going to be in Bali in October, but there's a pretty big gap between when I finished the Bali trip, which was Amy's 5 Freedom Retreats, which was another bougie thing, right?
Yeah.
You can see the travel theme going here. And they said, well, there's an Australia one in the middle, so why don't we just do that too? Okay. So I went from Bali to Singapore, Singapore to Australia, and jumped on a cruise. We did a 32-day cruise around Australia and New Zealand at the end of the year. That's why I wasn't here to buy my house. And so that was another thing. I bought a house, but
Yep.
and a
Man.
car. I bought a car last year too,
Oh,
which is
yeah, yeah. All the
crazy.
big stuff. All the big So, well, and I knew you were going on the cruise because I can't remember when I saw you before you left, but I knew you were heading out probably at, like, campfire, something. And I knew you were gonna be gone for, like, months, basically, and the time zones would be weird, but I was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, man, I need to check in," and I'm like, "It's probably the middle of the night," which I know is not like, you have your phone silenced or something, so I should just be like, "Hey, man, I hope the trip's going well." But how was it being, like, number 1, away that long, and then also, like, being on a ship that long?
Yeah, so that was my first experience being away for that extended period of time. So of course, I'm like a Quicken fanatic. I have all of my daily stuff that I do, watch all my accounts and so forth. And I couldn't really do that for 2 months. So that was a little freaky. So
Uh,
I set up spreadsheets to kind of track everything, but I put everything on autopilot. So all my bills were paid automatically, all my credit cards were paid automatically. Everything was just automated, which I had done previously, but I had never really stepped away from it to see if it would kind of work. And it did. It was flawless, no problems.
cool.
So I found out I could actually be away for a period of time. So that was kind of one of my first hesitations was being away from my home-based computer. Oh my God. But so that was one thing. The Bali trip was great. That was almost a month. And it was super easy because there's 50, friends basically that are traveling around with you pre and post and the event itself. So you kind of lose track of time when you're having fun, right?
Yeah.
And then when I went to Australia and New Zealand, there were 5 of us on the first half on the Australia piece and 7 of us on the second part, the New Zealand piece. And again, time just flies by when you're having fun.
Mhm.
And, this is a super bougie kind of cruise line. So you have a butler, and we had the Battle of the Butlers. They're all like, you know, bringing appetizers and drinks and everything to the rooms, and one butler's trying to one up the other butler. It was crazy. And there's not a lot of people on that ship. So there's
Okay.
very few people. There's no fighting for a lounge chair. I mean, you go to the pool, it's like, where do we want to sit? Not can we sit somewhere?
Gotcha.
And everything's included, so you're not worried about being nickeled and dimed. And it's more like I almost view it as like a private yacht experience almost on that line with a lot of older people. So we were some of the youngest on the ship.
Okay. That makes sense. Interesting. And to tie it back around real quick, so lots of cruising, but you mentioned that laundry was free
Yeah,
if you have the status or
right.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And that made me think like, oh yeah, just like packing for such a long trip. And obviously you could buy stuff while you're out. It's not like you're going to a place where they don't have anything. But yeah, it's always a struggle where you're like, I don't know what I'm gonna encounter. I feel like I need to bring everything, but I think you figured out how to, like, pack light so you don't have, like, a giant, huge suitcase, right?
No, so it was basically a medium-sized roller bag and a backpack.
Okay, cool.
And the roller bag, actually, Stephen and Becky brought to Australia for me because they were meeting me there, and so I just had the backpack in Bali.
Very cool. Yeah,
Now Bali is super hot, so you don't
okay,
need a lot of heavy clothes, so it's super
makes
easy to
sense.
pack for.
And I just went to Helena, Montana to judge some beer, and it was cold up there. So, yeah, that's where it gets tough, where you're like, "I think I need to bring boots for snow and, like, a bunch of layers, and it might be hot inside, but, below 0 outside."
Yeah, shoes are tough because they take up a lot of space.
I'm curious, how'd you sleep on a ship? Does the ocean motion get to you or
Yeah, I
anything?
don't really get very seasick, but we did cross the Tasman Sea, which is between Australia and New Zealand. And I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but there's been a lot of issues there. Apparently, it's one of the worst sea crossings in the world. I didn't know that ahead of time.
Wow.
And so we had some really rough seas where literally dishes were falling off the wall. Stephen and Becky's shower door, which was glass, came off and smashed. So they had to get a new suite. Yeah, it was
Whoa.
crazy. But I got these patches from Elle, who's in the Fi community, and she said, "Try these. They're homeopathic. They're not like medicated.
Mhm.
They work great."
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
no issues as far as
Gotcha.
that goes. But and sleeping, I just find at night it's almost like being in a hammock. You're just moving a little bit.
And I guess after, like, several days, you probably get used to it,
Yeah,
like almost anything, your
yeah.
body adjusts a little bit. Yeah, I definitely get a little seasick when I've been out on, like, the ferries and stuff
Well,
like that.
smaller boats, a lot of people
Yeah.
will get seasick on more than they will on a cruise ship.
Nah, that makes
Yeah.
sense, that makes sense. They're much bigger. Alright, I'll go next, and one thing that I've been doing, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see a couple guitars out in front, and I think it was during the pandemic, a lot of people, like myself, bought guitars. So I had played for a few years, but I got sort of, like a nicer high-end guitar, and I was like, "I love it. This is so much fun to play, it's so much more comfortable, and I just enjoy it." So, the last few years, I've been buying more guitars. Typically, I'm getting them used, though, so there's still a little frugality with it, but I'm getting them used. One benefit from that is, like a car, they depreciate almost immediately. So, like, if you're buying a used one, typically, you can get a reasonably good deal. Also similar to a car, they may already have a couple scratches and they don't look like super pristine. Because the problem is you get that new car, which you'll talk about in a second, and that first scratch, it hurts a little bit. But if you get like a used guitar, maybe someone has actually like played as a musician, like the one in front of me here, the red one. It is a Gibson Les Paul Special, and a touring musician hadn't used it for a few years, and I got a great deal on it, and it makes me happy. I love playing it, and I got another one over there, which actually sold another guitar, which I had some fun with for a few years, and then I was like, "I think I wanna get this one," which is an Eastman SB55V, and it's actually, like, relic, so it's made to look and feel like an old guitar from the '50s.
You know, I used to play guitar very minimally when I was in high school, as probably all guys did,
Yeah.
right? And I remember having I think it was an Ibanez like Strat copy or something like that. And it was okay and everything. But I had this friend who was a really good guitarist. And he's like, we got to go to the city. So we went to like whatever, one of those big guitar stores, and he's playing everything. And he's like, this is the one you want. And it was a
Yeah.
Hamer, Hammer, I
Okay, yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Played, like, really nice. I was like, "Now I understand the difference
Yeah.
between." I just thought, "Yeah, it's a guitar, it's fine, whatever."
Yeah.
You know, maybe the strings are different or whatever, but no, man, it makes a big difference. Yeah, and it was used, and it was he was just like, "Man, if I could have this, I would buy it," but he wasn't in the market for one, and then I was reading an article yesterday, I think it was I don't know, I read the Wall Street Journal a lot, so I don't know if it was in there or not, but it was talking about different musicians. Oh, it's like the guy that played for Canned Heat at Woodstock, and I guess he stepped in for somebody else or something like that. So he was playing that guy's guitar, and the amp blew up or something, and he had to play a different amp. And he's like, I would rather have a really good amp than a really good guitar. And so that may be the next thing in your future is a super nice amp because that apparently is a big deal. I wouldn't know, but that's what it said.
So, I also got a new amp not that long ago, and it's a Fender Blues Junior. Again, I got it on Craigslist, and it looks pristine, right? Like,
Yeah,
it
I'm
doesn't look
looking
like
at
it
it.
was ever used or anything, and, basically I got it for, like, less than half of what it would be brand new and blah, blah, blah. There's other I enjoy negotiating too and just like, "Hey, what kinda deal can we make here?" The tricky part is they're extremely loud, like, that I could, like not me, but, like, maybe someone like Kevin could actually play shows and, like, play in a small, like, medium-sized club, and, like, that would be loud enough. And shout out to Tyler. I've been playing some music with him, so he plays the drums.
I know, I saw one of those drum boxes you were talking about the other day. I drove around, I'm like, "Oh, that's that drum box thing you were talking about."
So cool. Yeah, yeah. So for the people that don't know, it's like the old little ATM, like, building shacks that are in just parking lots, and you probably don't even, like,
Yeah,
notice they're even
I
there
wouldn't have
anymore.
noticed it until you mentioned it, so
And I literally, like, drove past it so many times and never even realized there was a little building there. But basically, there's a set of drums, and it's in a commercial area, and there's no other connected buildings, so it could be extremely loud, and the thing is, drums are insanely loud. We have to wear tons of ear protection and all that, but to be able to play with a drummer, you need, like, a loud amp, and I was like, "Perfect excuse to get an amp." And it's been
And it's portable. I mean, it's not too huge, so you can
yeah.
move it around, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
It's not like a Marshall Stack,
no, 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 and
which Kevin did get recently, and he said, "I can't even turn it above 2."
it's so crazy, and for the people that don't know how big that is, which I don't know exactly because I
It's
haven't
huge, it's
stood
like
on
6
stage.
feet tall.
Yeah, this is what's behind, like, Slash or AC/DC, and there's, like, 4 of them, but Kevin has 1, so he
No,
could
he has
play.
2 cabinets and then whatever the
Oh, yeah,
the
the head.
monitor on
Yeah,
top,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So it's like the normal one, and then there's a slanted one, and then
Yeah.
yeah, we'll try to get a picture of Kevin and insert it here. But anyway, yeah, guitars and amps. And the thing is, I've mentioned it in previous shows, but you could play music with people. So I'm hanging out with Tyler, playing some music. It's mentally stimulating because I'm like trying to play music and like doing things beyond what I can do. And it's just fun. Like, I'm having so much fun with them. I haven't been working on a song. I'm just, like, down here making some
Yeah,
noise.
it doesn't matter. I mean, that was me,
Yeah.
I didn't know how to play much. I just played scales, and I had a teacher for a while, but who cares? You're by
Yeah,
yourself, you're enjoying it, it
it's
doesn't
fun.
matter, yeah.
So fun. Okay, what's next on your list?
So, I would say because of all this travel, I've been doing a lot of airline travel. A while ago, I decided I would only do, nonstops. So that was like a given. And then in the past couple of years, I decided I'm always going to do economy plus. So now they have like economy basic, economy plus, which is the extra leg room. And I said, it's a given. I'm always going to do economy plus. So that was kind of the first like little test to like, can I spend more money? And then lately, I've been doing so if I go overseas, I always do premium economy, which is like a business class or first class seat domestically, internationally. And then also what I do is I look for those first class upgrades that typically happen about 30 days out. They'll send you like, "Hey, you could upgrade to first class for whatever." And my frugality mindset is still there. And I'm like, well, I don't want to pay more than $100 an hour. So if it's a
Uh,
10-hour flight, $1,000, that's kind of what I would like to pay
yeah,
under, but I've allowed myself to go a little bit over that. So when I was going to Australia, I think from Singapore, I got a upgrade. And these are the lay flat Singapore Airlines, super nice, like cocoons.
yeah.
It's like $1,000. So I was like, and it was an 8-hour flight or a 7-hour flight. And I was like, all right, whatever. It's a long day. I'm just going to do it. And then lately, I did upgrade. My daughter and I are going on another cruise to Iceland this year. And again, with some of the slackers, we're doing Iceland, Scotland. We got another one down in the Mediterranean. So it's like 6 weeks that she's going to be with me. My mom's coming on part of that. But we upgraded to lay flat first class on the way over because it's an overnight flight. And we're going to be in Dublin only for 2 days before we leave. And we want to be able to hit the ground running and be well rested. And
Got it.
so we did pull the trigger on that. So I've definitely been flying a little nicer in
Okay.
the past year.
And I've tested some of the, like, economy plus, and I don't know, certain days, I feel, like, more claustrophobic on the plane, and I'm like, "Is it smaller or is it, like, mental or what's going on?" But those handful of times, like, the 2 inches they give you or whatever for the economy
It makes a
plus,
difference. It
it
does.
really feels so much different. Now, for the higher level, and you mentioned, like, international, and these are longer flights, is it $1,000 on top of whatever the initial ticket was, or
Yeah,
is
usually it's an add-on amount. Sometimes they'll refund you if you did economy plus, they might give you that economy plus amount back. It depends on the airline, but most of the time it's just a differential fare. But like for instance, I think our Dublin trip, we're doing it on American. Oh, and this is the other thing I do. So it's that one we can't do as a nonstop from Denver. That one is going through DFW, I think. But these short leg domestic pieces, I pretty much always just do first class now because I'm like, let me at least be well rested on one of the legs.
okay.
So, and on the way back, we're coming back from Monte Carlo. And so we have to fly from Nice to Philadelphia, Philadelphia to Denver. And the Nice to Philadelphia, we're on premium economy. I'm waiting to try to get an upgrade there, but it's still a little pricey. But on the Philadelphia to Denver, I think it was a $200 upgrade to first class. And I'm like, you know what? let's just do it. It's the second leg. We're going to be tired. Let's just make it nice.
Got it.
Um, I forgot what your question was. Oh, the difference. Yeah. So in the one to Dublin, if we bought the first class ticket outright at the gate, at the beginning, it was going to be like $5,000 or $6,000 each.
Mhm.
So we bought a premium economy flight, which I think was under $1,000. So it was a premium economy. Well, it was economy to DFW and then premium economy from DFW to Dublin. But it was only $1,000. And premium economy, those seats, they go back pretty far. They just don't lay all the way flat. And there's only a handful of them. It's kind of like a first class seat on a domestic flight. That's what it feels like. It's still pretty good,
Mhm.
So, I mean, if you're stuck with that, it's not so bad. But then they had an offer for, I think it was like, I want to say $1,200 to upgrade to the lay flat. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And then so I paid $1,000 at the outset, plus the $1,200 is $2,200 versus the $5,000 or $6,000 it would have been if I bought it at the beginning.
Got it.
So yeah, still the frugality person in me
Yeah.
is trying to make a deal.
Well, I mean, even at your very high level of wealth, like $5,000 a pop, and you're like,
Yeah.
I could do like the opportunity cost of the $3,000 or whatever. It's like you could pay for some awesome meals on the vacation. So it's just
Right.
like, yeah, you could take your time with it. And you say about 30 days out is when some of these upgrades
Well,
are
and this
available.
one actually just came through and we're still, I don't know, a couple months out on that one.
Okay.
So, and,
Just keep looking.
again, there aren't that many first class seats. So you do kind of have to be mindful that you may not get it 30 days out. It may be gone.
Gotcha. Yeah, those are certainly non-frugal. Like I know I've been studying a little bit with some of the credit card rewards and travel hacking. I know like our friend Kristen Knapp, people are like, oh yeah, I got this amazing flight and blah, blah, blah. And I don't find it super enjoyable to whatever you have to like convert your Chase points to Chick-fil-A reward points. And then you gotta transfer to, like,
Yeah.
British Airways, and then
I've
you take
been
a boat.
I've been successful with hotels,
Okay.
Hyatt
Yeah.
transfers, like the no-brainer, easy button.
Yep.
And that's from like Chase to Hyatt. I do that all the time, stay in Hyatts all the time.
Yeah.
And then I have been successful just using the points for just buying hotel rooms with points.
Okay.
So we're doing that. We're going to Tahiti in like a few weeks.
Oh, really? Man.
And there's some like, on the water bungalows that not over the water, but on the water
Sure.
that I would never pay cash for because it's just like crazy expensive. But I
Yeah.
was like, I got all these points.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
not the best redemption rate, but what else am I going to use it for?
Right.
So I did that. And then also we are flying to Tahiti on United Premium Economy from Denver to San Francisco to Tahiti, and it was 60,000 points. That was like a super no-brainer. Yeah, and it's premium
Whoa.
economy, so it's not even just basic seats.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was a
crazy.
big score. $5 plus 60,000 points.
That's nuts. I think I'm using, like, 30,000 points to go to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
No offense, Cincinnati, I'm very much looking forward to it. But, yeah, the Chase to Hyatt, I'm getting better. There are hoops that you could jump through, and then there's some, like, easier redemption, and
Yeah.
I'm a beginner, so I'm trying not to get overwhelmed
Yeah.
with complexity, and like anything, you could always make things more complicated, so
Right.
I'm building my way up, and, it's working out well,
Yeah,
like, so
and the
far.
Chase to Hyatt is really it is such a good redemption value,
Mm,
and literally, I have a high status at Hyatt, but I've never paid them $1, and they're like, "Oh, Mr. Troutman, thanks for coming back. Thanks for giving me a free room again."
That's cool. Yeah, and I was gonna say, we're staying at one on, Monday, and it was through Kristen's help, and I don't know the schedule, the episodes will be out, but I did 2 shows with Kristen where it's, like, advanced and beginner, like, travel
Oh, I
hacking
can't wait to hear
stuff.
those, yeah.
Very good, and I just got a new whatever the Chase Sapphire is it the reserve is the
Yeah.
lower one?
No, preferred.
Preferred, I got the preferred one because I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to use all this stuff just because
Yeah,
we
I
don't
mean,
travel as
yeah,
much.
the big thing with the reserve is, well, you get a little extra on the point side, on the accumulation side, but you do get the lounges,
Yeah,
which is good, but Capital One is a nice competitor to that, and our Capital One lounge in Denver is awesome.
it's nice,
Yeah.
yeah, And luckily I have friends that have access. So I'll see you in there before too long. All right, we'll keep on trucking here. So I'm gonna add one more from my end. Actually, we'll do quick hitters.
Yeah.
So I got an e-bike not too
Ooh,
long ago,
yeah.
and it's electric, and I forget the model name, but it's the one that's more like a cruiser. So I look like an old lady riding on the beach or something like that. It's hilarious. Elizabeth just laughs at me riding it, but it's more comfortable than other bikes that I had. You know what I'm talking about. It's
Yeah,
just
they're
I look
s
ridiculous.
like, sitting up kind of, yeah, with the handlebars, like, straight up. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it, but I'm like, "I want a comfortable bike." So I splurged for that and got, like, the extra extended battery and a couple
Yeah.
other things.
Mhm.
Really happy with that. I've only been out a handful of times, like, less than 100 of miles because I got it around the holidays, and it's been a little cold
Yeah.
which is just not super pleasant to go fast. It's just cold, but that's been awesome. I'll do one more, and I guess just the frugal habit is strong within many of us. And I had a good one, which is to just like resist buying stuff so often on Amazon. And I would like hold off buying things and then I would get it. And I'm like, this was amazing. I wish I would have gotten this sooner. So I've kind of eased up on that and I will order if I'm like, I think this could be helpful. I usually have a pretty good gut feeling about it, then I will go ahead and get it. And I know this is again the opposite of what most people they're like, put it in your cart and wait 30 days and see if you still need it. Like I stopped doing I mean, I wasn't doing that. I'm like, I'm not gonna order anything. So now I'm like, I eased up and I'm like ordering stuff. Like there's a couple guitar pedals over there and like, there's a few other things where I'm just like, you know what? I think it'll make me happy. I'll give it a shot. So it's felt
Yeah,
good.
and I'm amazed here. So used to live in Crested Butte, and when you ordered on Amazon, it was like 5 days,
Okay. Yeah.
or maybe 3 days if you're lucky. Here, it's like, oh, that'll be here tomorrow morning. I'm like, what? How is that possible?
Or later in the afternoon.
Right?
It's like I literally ordered a couple a couple wires and others things, and it's like, it'll be here before 5.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I know. So it's almost scary how easy it is to buy stuff. So I usually do put it in my kind of wish list or in the cart. And I do ask myself, at least give it some thought before hitting buy because it is super easy to just say buy and it's here like you said, this afternoon.
It's weird. Yeah. So I put it through I think a reasonable filter, but I've eased up a little bit and it feels good because it wasn't deprivation before. Obviously I mean, you could look around here. I have a million gadgets and like electronics and all that stuff. But because of that, I do have a pretty good gauge on, is this going to help me do something like faster, easier, just a smarter way to solve a problem or not? Or is this just like a wasteful thing? So I'm usually thoughtful about it. But in the past, I was just like, I will keep putting it off and then realize, oh, I could have solved that problem for like $13. And I just thought it was going to be too expensive or whatever. So,
Yeah.
all right. What else do you have on your list you could run
Well, I
through?
had two big things last year. If those weren't big enough, I bought a new car last year.
Nice.
Now, I've been saving for that car, and the money was in a separate I'm one of these people that needs to compartmentalize
Okay.
everything. So I had a separate savings account that I had the money fully funded for this car. So it wasn't like I ran out and saw a TV ad and decided to, oh, for only $300 a month, we can put you in this brand new car. No, I bought a 2024 Toyota RAV4 hybrid.
Nice.
And I've had Toyotas for most of my life. I have a Toyota FJ Cruiser. I still have it. It's parked in the driveway right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
as a matter of fact, with 210,000 miles on it. And it has just been fabulous. But, they're not the most comfortable vehicles. They're also not great on gas mileage. So, for the most part, I leave that in Crested Butte. I have this little apartment over there. So I leave it over there and I drive the RAV4 back and forth. And every time I fill it up, I'm like, this can't be right. It can't be full. It's $13. I drove all the way to Crested Butte, which is 200 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this thing gets almost 50 miles to the gallon. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's a hybrid. It's not plug-in hybrid. It's just a
Yeah.
regular hybrid. And I had been looking at them for a while and, was hoping to get a used one.
Uh-huh.
But the used ones were actually going at the time I was looking because I ordered this and it took like 8 months to come in
Really? Dang.
because I wanted it, the way I wanted it. And
Yeah.
at the time, they were just hard to come by. And I was looking at used ones on the lot. Either they weren't exactly what I wanted, but for the most part, they were selling them over the cost of a new one because you could have it today.
Gotcha.
And they might have a couple thousand miles on it. I'm like, I don't want a car that has a couple thousand miles on it. It's going to cost me more and I have a car. It's not like I'm out of a vehicle.
Right.
So I could afford to wait. So I ordered it, came in 8 months later, and I love it. It's great.
Got it. And
And I'll have it for another 20 years. So my FJ Cruiser is
Yeah.
2008.
Got
So I keep cars for a long time.
Interesting. Yeah, and you told me I rode in the RAV4, like, right after you got it. I think we were down in Colorado Springs or
Yeah.
something. It was pretty fresh and new then.
Yeah, it's brand new at that time.
So, and you don't have to answer. I'm just curious. What did that cost you?
So take home with tax and all the stuff, I think it was 43.
Not bad. Okay.
Well, that was a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot for a car.
Yeah.
And I had looked at the Prime, which is a plug-in.
Mhm.
They want another 10 on top for that. Now,
Okay.
mine has a lot of bells and whistles, so,
Yeah,
I mean, you can get them for cheaper if you cut out some of the stuff that I got, but I keep cars for so long, I was like, I'm gonna want the nicer radio, I'm gonna want the slightly bigger screen, and I want the color choice that I chose in the model line.
Right.
I got the XSE. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to have this for a long time. A couple thousand extra dollars of these add-ons. I'm going to be happy I had it, just like, with your stuff.
We talked because you sold a truck as well, and I have an old truck
Yeah.
around the same
Yeah.
time. I've had it for 19 years, and it's like a 2005, so it's a 20-year-old truck.
Yeah.
And yeah, to your point, I keep stuff for a long time as well. So I was like, it makes sense to, like, if you know how you work and you're good to keep a
Yeah,
car.
I did have a 2004 F250. Now, you talk about gas mileage. I think it's horrendous.
Yeah.
And it was basically a utilitarian vehicle by then. The gas gauge didn't work. The converter had been stolen. It had dents in it. And I was just like, I don't need this anymore. So I got rid of that. So that was my vehicle that I did get rid of.
Yeah. And I think I've been dragging my feet. Pretty sure I'm going to sell my truck. So if anyone's
You'll get
interested,
good money for it.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. I mean, I was shocked. I was like, no, I looked up what it was worth. And actually, the person that bought it was in the town that I lived in, Crescent Butte. And they brought it to the mechanic and they came back and said, done. So I was like, well, I guess the mechanic liked it. But he was the same mechanic that had worked on it the whole time. And I think he was just like, these things are bomber. They're
Yeah,
really
yeah.
good. It was the small V8, but those things apparently go forever.
Gotcha.
And it had like 170,000 miles. They sold it for like $5,000. So
Interesting. Yeah, and I was gonna say I have the medium V8, so maybe the small, so it's the
yeah, the
4.6.
I have a
yeah.
5.8 V8.
Okay. So you,
5.4.
well, you were
5.4.
you're in the, it was a bigger, you're
Right,
250, mine's a
250.
150,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah.
Still, those engines go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, it wasn't like the first model year, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, okay. Anything else?
I bought
on
a
your
house.
list? Okay. Another big hitter, which
But I
yeah.
sold a house for far more than I bought this one for. So I downsized in price. I did not downsize in size much.
Gotcha.
So my old house was 2,700 square feet. This one's 2,100 square feet. And this was a new build. So everything was nice and new. And I don't have to hopefully worry about any mechanical things or anything like that. It's even got a warranty for a year. So while I don't really view it as a purchase necessarily, it's more of a swap.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And so this is one of the smallest house, like our house is one of the smallest houses in the neighborhood. I think it literally is the smallest model that you can get, which is still a little bit too
How many
big
square
for us.
feet is this?
I think it's 1,800 upstairs, and the unfinished basement is
Oh, okay.
another 900 or so.
Yeah, that's nice. I only have a crawl space downstairs. So
Okay.
That's kind of a bummer.
Interesting. And I was going to say, like, you probably could have downsized to something even smaller, but it's hard to find something.
Yeah, apparently there's not a lot of new builds in Longmont. And
Yeah.
so I'm over by the airport, which is kind of funny because I want to ask you this question. What's with the plane? I'm looking at this plane, and these are the planes that fly in and out of the airport, literally over my house all the time, and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." He has one of those planes on, his logo.
So, Carl and I started the show, and I had the idea for Mile High Fi. I was like, "Oh, it's catchy. I
Yeah,
like that name." And then we were starting to think about, like, logos, and we're 13-year-old boys at heart, and we were like, "Oh, Mile High Club, Mile High
right.
Club," and then Mile High Fi Club, and we're like, "Okay, we could throw that in." So he was like,
Okay,
"I'll
that's the
draw it up."
airplane.
So this is Carl's art. It's a
It's awesome.
biplane, and yeah, we don't
And I
have any other
live right,
logo.
you can see the mountains from my house, you can see these planes, it's like, "Oh, this is like."
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
very cool.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, so there's a bunch of shirts floating around out there. We
Yeah,
got stickers and all that stuff, but
it's an awesome logo.
thank you.
I
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
you did it, but I have to give
Carl.
kudos
Yeah,
to Carl.
all Carl.
I don't know where we were on that last conversation.
All good. I think well, you bought a house. We were just talking about
Oh,
house stuff.
size and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's not a ton of new construction, and it's tough to find houses that are
Yeah.
sort of smaller.
Yeah, and my lot is sizable, it's like a third of an acre.
Okay,
So
that is
that
pretty
was
cool.
one thing that attracted me. The other thing, as I mentioned, I'm gonna be 60 this year. Everything's on one level.
Yeah,
So it's a 3-bedroom plus an office. So I have room for some guests, and it's kinda like your upstairs living area. It's all open, so I really like that.
cool.
It's also got a 3-car garage, which is an added bonus, but yeah.
That is yeah, it's tight in the garage, and people around here have different toys or
Yeah.
whatever, and they make I mean, I don't even think I could pull my truck in, but it basically has, like, 2 inches on like, to the door and then 2 inches to, like, the steps, like, it's
Yeah, that's why. Because I looked at so I have a 2 and a 1. So the 1 is kinda like my,
yeah,
stuff bay, I guess you would say. And the 2, my daughter was over and she has a Toyota 4Runner, and I had well, the RAV4 when she was there, and I was like, "Are these gonna even fit in here?" Like, the door doesn't seem wide enough,
right.
but they do, but you don't have a lot of room. So,
Yeah.
definitely you have to have your wits about you when you're coming in and out of the garage.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like garages are smaller or I mean, they're built for smaller cars,
Yeah, in my
basically.
other house, we had 2 individual doors. It was still a 2-car garage, but it was 2 individual doors, and I think you get a lot more room that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a few feet in between, so you
Yeah,
could
and even the
actually open the
doors
door.
seem like 2 if you put the 2 doors next to each other, they seem like they would be wider than a double door.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I covered the stuff on my list. Any others on yours?
No, just a lot of more of the same this year. Any big things you're looking at doing in 2025?
The one big thing is we're thinking about getting out of the Front Range area during the heat of the summer
Yeah.
and head up to the mountains. So I'm not sure. Like we went a couple times to like Breckenridge and Leadville last year.
Mhm.
We do enjoy some novelty, but at the same time, like Leadville is super cool. It's a little more rugged and there's like less commercial stuff around. So I like that kind of feel for a town. But yeah, we may rent a place for like a month or something like that.
Oh, that's cool. That's one of the reasons I wanted to keep a foothold in Crested Butte because I know it gets hot here in the summer, so,
Yeah, and then, you go up there, hiking is great,
yeah.
it's a little bit I mean, it could still get up to, some warm temperatures, and it does feel hot because the sun is quite intense, but at night, it cools
Yeah,
off, and
it
it
gets
just
cold.
it feels great,
Yeah,
and you've lived up there for a long time, so it's just,
yeah.
like,
Yeah,
feels
it's
comfy.
super cool in the summer, and when we moved to Crested Butte, we moved there for the skiing, and the saying was, "You come for the winter, you stay for the summer," because the summers are just gorgeous up in the mountains.
Yeah, looks so amazing. So that might be a big splurge that we do. And other than that, like we're going on a road trip coming up, heading to Joshua Tree and Death Valley, and we were slowly testing just like staying at nicer places a little bit more. Like we just switched from the original Airbnb that we had booked to one that was maybe 30% more expensive, but it's just like it looks a little bigger, looks a little bit nicer, and it'll be more comfortable in there for sure.
Yeah,
So,
awesome.
awesome. Before we jet, we didn't mention it, but we're gonna publish this on both of
Yep.
our feeds. So if they're listening to this on the Mile High Five feed, why don't you talk about your show a little bit?
Yeah, so it's the Mark's Money Mind show. I took a little bit of a hiatus in January and February, so this will be one of the first episodes coming back into action. And I started it with your help actually last year, right around economy time, which is coming up here.
Right, right.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's probably about 40 episodes out there already. And yeah, I'm looking forward to just getting back behind the mic and publishing a whole bunch of new shows. And yeah,
Very cool. And I was gonna say you did a great job, like, recording while you were on the road and stuff, like, when we were working together to get the show launched, I was like, you could bring this stuff and da 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 da, and I listened to some of the shows when you were, like, on a ship and otherwise, you're like, "I'm not sure when I'm gonna publish this," but, like, the audio was awesome, and
well,
I didn't
and
tell you.
honestly, all the stuff that with the mentorship that you did was just fabulous. I would never have gotten it off the ground. And just selecting very small things like the right equipment, the right setup, thinking about certain things, making sure your audio is really good versus concentrating more on the video, concentrate more on the audio. And yeah, we even did one with it was Alan and Katie Donegan and Rachel Richards. And this was in one of the rooms at the Plataran in Bali. And, I was so worried about the sound because it was all like marble floors. And I was like, this is going to come out really bad. But running it through Auphonic
Yeah, yeah.
was just, cleaned it all up and it came out really good.
It's
So,
pretty yeah, I couldn't tell
so
you
yeah.
weren't in
Oh
a
yeah, that
studio.
was not an ideal location to be recording in. And literally the other thing was, it was like we were running to do it in time because we had something else to do and we were trying to squeeze it in. I'm like, oh my God, this is not gonna work.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, check out Mark's show if you haven't checked it out. There's a lot of familiar faces and great topics that you cover. So,
Great, thanks. Thank you for listening to this week's show. Please click follow on your favorite podcast player or subscribe on YouTube to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Also, please leave a rating and review for the show. This helps improve the ranking and enables other like-minded people find the content in their podcast players. If you would like me to answer a question on the show, please send it to Mark at marksmoneymind.com and put podcast question in the subject line. Let me know your first name or let me know if you would like to remain anonymous, and also your state of residence if you choose. I would also appreciate it if you would recommend this show to friends and family who might benefit from this content. See you next time on the Mark's Money Mind Show. Until then, make some, save and invest, live on the rest. Now for the all-important disclaimer. This show is for education and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered investment, tax, or legal advice. Please consult the appropriate advisor or advisors before implementing anything you hear on this show, or any other show for that matter. While I fully intend for everything on this show to be true and accurate at the time of each recording, occasionally errors may occur, so please do your own due diligence on anything discussed.